Dial H number 15, written by China Miéville, art by Alberto Ponticelli. This is the final issue of the series, and oh my god, is it dense. So I'm going to do my best here by woof. All right. So last issue, everyone made it to the exchange, and we're facing down with Centipede, and immediately the fight breaks out. We see them summon some gear. We see Dwan is just rapidly changing into a bunch of different heroes. Kent turns into a hero called Secret Faction, whose whole thing is that he's able to basically spread confusion and stuff like that in people's minds by pitting them against themselves. But because Centipede is able to split into the multiple bodies, it turns out that Secret Faction is able to get those bodies to fight each other physically. And so Centipede is very much clearly outmatched at this point. So he calls in Fixer, and Fixer comes in and starts fighting with them as well. And we see that basically Fixer does manage to get the upper hand enough on Kent that he's able to take him hostage and pick him up and take him back to the exchange. All the other heroes are left there, sitting there waiting and unable to do anything. So they say, all right, we got to go. We got to move in. Dwan, do you see anything? Is there anything that we should be aware of? And he turns into a hero called Blink Centurion, which is just an eye wearing a Roman gladiatorial outfit. And he sees a whole bunch of creatures and stuff making their way through the woods. So they've got to fight as best they can. But what they notice is that a bunch of the wires from the exchange are crossing over with each other and are therefore causing these things that are mishmashes of different entities to just be created. So we're seeing a giraffe with an elephant's head, or a barn with a pyramid on top of it, some really weird stuff. So they say, okay, that's causing all the mixed up things. Is there any way that we can get into this building? Because that's probably where they're keeping Kent. And they look up on the building and they see it's covered in windows. So then they look to Open Window Man and they're like, huh? So then we go inside, and Kent is currently being held down, tied down by Centipede, Fixer, and the Lost Operator, who I thought was the same as Fixer up until this issue, but apparently there are two distinct entities where Fixer was actually fighting against this whole time, but now he's working with him. So at that point, we have Kent, and he's saying, you're a murderer, you've done horrible things. And basically says, the universe is not wired correctly. As such, we are able to tap into things with our H dial, S dial, G dials, J dials, or even my D dial, the Doom dial, where he's able to dial up apocalypses. And he dials up an apocalypse of this cold thing, this freezing thing. And he points out, most planets have one or two apocalypse stories, the things that will end the planet that they're afraid of. Humans, Earth, they have hundreds. So you got a 50-50 chance when you use the D-dial that it's going to be something that humans created. So either way, Fixer, find out what he knows and then kill him. So Centipede, he calls out Centipede, why are you helping him? He's pure evil. And Centipede reveals, I'm not able to use the H dial because I don't see myself as a hero. I know I'm not a good die. O is making me one that will work for me. And he's like, what? Dial E for evil? Which we'll totally see. But he's like, yeah, no, that's the thing. And then he turns to Fixer. He's like, Fixer, you were fighting against O. You're fighting against Centipede. Why are you doing this now? And he says, yeah, Centipede latched onto me after the end of our fight. And he kept on talking to me as best he could. He just wouldn't let go until finally he told me that there were signals from the exchange and that it was time for me to return home. And when he did, he found that the exchange was destroyed. It wasn't when he left. And so he de-transforms out of his Fixer gear. He turns back into the way he was. And he said, now, let me show you. And he transforms into a psychic narwhal that is able to transmit his thoughts over to Kent. And this is just everything. This is the whole boiling over. So pay very close attention here. I'll do my best. There was a culture that the exchange existed in, and the whole thing was that they used these dials to basically live. They copied over different things from different universes using these dials for things like gear and vehicles and creatures and such like that. Sidekicks, heroes, whenever they needed them. However, some of the dials, without their knowledge, were faulty, and instead of copying things, they stole them outright. The universes that had their things stolen outright eventually learned of the dialers, and they were very upset by this. So they all formed armies to go after the dialers and attack them. Mind you, some of them also didn't like the fact that they were even just copying. I am going to get back to this because it is a major theme point, but two armies, major armies formed, they attacked the exchange, and everything was going to hell. So there was one operator, O, who was like really, really good with the stuff, and he decided that he was going to use some big gear. So he took a bunch of garbage ass dials from literally the garbage chute, and he amplified them in strange ways. He was able to build them into like larger bombs and such. And so he activated this huge bomb that just destroyed the entire exchange and threw all of their trash and gears and stuff throughout the multiverse, across all the dimensions and through time. So the gear that showed up, the telephone booth that Kent used in issue 1, was actually just a remnant from this explosion. It was a broken gear from the trash pile that landed in this dimension and formed itself Doctor Who style into something that like people would think, oh, that's normal, it fits in here. So once that was done, the armies dissipated, but they realized, okay, we need to clean up our mess. We need to go after O. So the fixer was going after the last operator, but now he realized coming back home, the exchange fell. Everyone was gone. It's just O and the fixer left in terms of their original stuff. So we see that O, he landed on Earth, and he slowly he had none of his technology, and he slowly started influencing people like Alexander Graham Bell and Edison and all these people to push the dials into creation so that eventually a J dial could be made, and therefore he could jump his way back over to the exchange. And as Fixer's explaining all this, saying, and that's why I joined him, because I was loyal to this world that it doesn't exist anymore. I need some guidance there. And Kent basically or am I saying Kent this whole time? It's Gent. My bad. Jen tells him like, no, you're not telling me your justification. You're trying to get me to talk you out of it. So we see Dwan transforms into a sharpshooter sort of thing, and he throws rocks at this window enough to crack it open, not break it. Breaking it doesn't count as open. So he just opens the window, and therefore Open Window Man and everyone else is able to make their way into basically an armory room, just a room that's filled to the brim with dials. So they exchange out their old broken ones for new ones that work. Dwan, unfortunately, is unable to. And we see they also have an instruction booklet, and so we see Bonsa tells Roxy to dial a specific number, which gets a Matryoshka doll, a like nesting doll hero that is able to encompass Centipede and not let him escape. So he's no longer a problem. O says, Fixer, come in here, deal with them. But Fixer has been talked out of it by Nelson and turns against O. So O, however, says, like, you don't understand. I'm not a dialer. I'm an operator. I can separate you from your dials. And so he takes away Fixer's ability to use his dial. Centipede comes in, punches him in the face, takes him out of the fight. So Dwan comes in and starts transforming rapidly enough that O is unable to separate him from the dial. And he's like, well, fine, if I can't separate you from the dial, I'll make you transform even faster. And he speeds up the rate of transformations from Dwan to the point where he's about to overflow. He can't control it anymore. So everyone gets shuffled out the open window by Open Window Man, and they fall their way back down to the ground. And it's just like, okay, we're out of ideas. Like, we managed to save Nelson, but like, what are we supposed to do if O can just separate us from our dials at any point? And Roxy and Bonsa look up at the crossed wire creations, these weird creatures that have existed. And they're like, wait a minute, there's an idea. You guys cover for us. We're going to work on this. So Centipede comes out and he's like, hey guys, great news. O just made me my dial, a dial that I'm able to use. And he added a little finishing touch on it. So Centipede turns a dial, and turns out that yes, it lets him transform into villains, but also every single one of his like bodies behind him transforms into a different villain as well. So he is just an entire army all in one. So Nelson takes the dial from Roxy, and she apparently made some slight adjustments to it, and he uses it to transform into Chimney Lachrymose, which is a fusion, a crisscross of the first two things that Nelson ever transformed into. And Open Window Man notices, like, wait a minute, that's like Almost Boy Chimney, my old friend. Like, what's that about? But it's not quite him. Also, Bonsa died during the attack. Don't worry about it. It happened. So, turns out that O is unable to undo the crossed wire transformations, these little crisscrosses here. So any of these mashups, totally safe to attack O. And so he does so. He transforms through all of the transformations we saw him do during the first arc. He does mashups of all of them until finally we see he becomes one called Tugboat Resin, and O transforms, because he is able to transform as well, into Synapsitrix. And he's like, you don't understand. I'm still an operator, though. And he uses that to amplify his powers and just grow to these huge, huge heights. And Roxy's like, okay, Nelson will do what he can. Just slow him down. We'll take care of the rest. So they start climbing up the exchange, Open Window Man and Roxy. Roxy's unable to transform at the moment. Nelson's doing his best to just keep on transforming into these different things now that he has some level of control over it with a non-broken dial. Transforms throughout all these things just to distract O long enough that Roxy's able to do her thing. Centipede goes up, tries to attack. Open Window Man holds him off. Roxy goes in and crosses the wires in the exchange itself and overrides the safeties on the entire exchange, which allows the operator to basically overload. The fact he's amplifying his powers, the safeties are off, he amplifies too much. We see him become an amalgamation of pretty much every DC superhero. We see some Green Lantern, Shazam, Flash, Superman, Aquaman, and because it's unstable and overflowing with an energy, he just explodes. He explodes into a crater, and we see Nelson detransforms because the exchange itself is kind of busted right now. Everyone's detransformed. Centipede's also gone, as far as they can tell, gone in the explosion. And they realize, we're stuck on this planet. The dials don't work. What are we supposed to do? And Roxy says, hey, we'll collect some junk, we'll figure it out, and we'll dial, because that's what we are. We're dialers. And that's the issue. Okay, something I need to go back to, because it really does focus on the central theme of this book, is during the fight, where he's explaining, like, oh yeah, the operators fought against all these people who were having their powers stolen. They specifically say, like, people didn't like the fact that we were stealing their powers, but also they didn't like the fact that we were copying them either. They saw that as a form of theft. And so they formed two armies, the Material Projection Alterity Army and the Rapid Interreality Assault Alliance. And I thought to myself, that sounds like a really, really forced name. Why would they pick those names? And then you look at the acronyms, and the acronyms of the two are the MPAA and the RIAA, which for anybody who's dealt with anything copyright related are like the people who sue people for downloading songs and stealing movies. This entire book has been a metaphor for piracy, of stealing powers without consent being a form of piracy. And how copying is not itself a form of piracy, as it is a victimless crime. This book advocates piracy. That's the theme. After 16, I forgot about the Zero issue. That's what it was all about. I near lost my goddamn mind when I figured out that bit. That was incredible. I cannot overstate how smart this book is. I really do enjoy it, because I couldn't see any way that this book ended satisfyingly. It seemed like there was so much going on, and there was no way we were possibly going to be able to wrap it all up. And then they did it. I mean, sure, it doesn't feel like a little neat bow on everything, but I think it doesn't need that. It doesn't feel. They explained everything I was confused about, admittedly, in a much more oversized issue, but like, they got it all done. They did it. And admittedly, there is one more issue in terms of a Villains Month tie in, Dial E for Evil, so we will see what that is about. But this is essentially the finale, and I gotta say, I think they did a fantastic job. This series was confusing, and then all of a sudden, as I'm reading this issue, everything just clicks into place. The whole series, it feels like it was all planned from the beginning, even though I highly doubt it was. So, yeah, man, I could gush on this book for a while longer. I did not expect going into it to like it as much as I did. And it's kind of a sad thing that it didn't get as much love as I think it should have. But I gotta say, this is definitely this particular issue, just with that reveal of it all being a metaphor for piracy. I got to give it a 9. I think it was great. I think it's smart writing at its best, and I would love to actually go through and reread this, knowing how it ends, to see how much of it was really set up from the beginning, because I was confused in those intro issues, but I think this does read better once you know everything that's going on. So 9 for this. Definitely check out Dial H if you have not.